of Maria. She likes to be called by that as well. Is Boots a real name and a trail name?
Both. She's named after a hostel in Tennessee.
Wow, maybe you'll get to hear the story, maybe you won't. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Maria. Thank you so much. And I think the dog speaks for the kind of presenter that Maria is going to be, how well behaved Boots is.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to start out by saying that I'm very nervous, so I don't usually like speaking in front of people, but I feel very passionately about this, so I had to come down here and give a presentation. First, a little bit about myself. My trail name's Weezy P. I've been hiking the trail for about 9 years. I've got 1,789 miles done. And then when I got her, I said, why not start over again? So it's a good excuse. When you get a new dog, you can start the trail over. So this is Boots. She's named after Boots Off Hostel in Tennessee. Her middle name's Waya. She first stepped foot on the AT when she was 9 weeks old. And she only took a few steps because of growth plates, but she now has hiked over 675 miles of the trail. She's also I call her my hiker trash service dog. She is trained to handle my asthma and anxiety if I get it. You know, sometimes you're like, oh, did I leave my tent poles back there? So she's trained to handle that, but she has 2 separate sets of rules. She has her hiker rules, which is greeting and being part of the trail community, and then she has her public access rules. So she's welcome to be greeted. She is wearing this leash today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I get into off-leash dogs, because she was attacked about 3 weeks ago by 2 off-leash dogs. So the way I'm going to approach this is to go through the steps of leave no trace as they apply to your dog. So I'm going to go ahead and start with plan and prepare ahead. Before you start hiking with your dog, you really need to, as you should for yourself as well, bring them to the doctor, get them checked out, make sure they have full wellness check, that they're caught up with all their vaccinations, particularly the Lyme vaccine and also Lepto. Heartworms are very dominant in the South, so you're going to want to talk to your vet about getting your dog on heartworm medication. A lot of times it's not detectable until it's too late, and you might not pick it up, or the dog might not have any symptoms until you go to the vet or until they're very sick. Brea talked about this too, about tick and flea protection. Make sure that you're prepared for that. She uses a Seresto collar. She's a herding breed. Herding breeds a lot of times cannot use anything with ivermectin in it. It can cause seizures and even death. So make sure that you're talking to your vet about what type of medication is good for her. As she is a herding breed, she uses Interceptor for heartworm, and that's good. So you do have pills that you can use for them. There's Seresto collar, there's topical treatments. You can also use permethrin to permethrin your dog's pack. That's totally safe for them. I do that when we get into backpacking season, weather starts getting warmer, her pack gets permethrin. When you're backpacking with them, make sure you're doing nightly tick checks. I know I see a lot of darker colored dogs. I know it's really hard. Just try to use your headlamp or your phone light and just really try to check them. When you are thinking about taking your dog, make sure that they're of the right age. Young dogs, before they're full grown, they have to have their growth plates fused before they can do any high mileage. So check with that. And also if they might be up there in the years and start getting into their senior years. They could be, Australian Shepherds tend to go strong until the end. Other dogs kind of start aging out of hiking. Make sure that they're cleared that way. On their health, you also want to look into carrying a first aid kit for your dog. Adventure Medical makes one. It's pretty intense. You can also talk to your vet about what to put in specifically for your dog. You can also get pain reliever, like I call it doggy Advil, that you can get from your vet to handle any pain. Some dogs, you'll know when they're in pain. Other dogs have very high pain thresholds, herding breed. I'm very familiar with herding breeds, if you can't tell. I have an Australian Shepherd at home too. So herding breeds tend to have a very high pain threshold, so you're not going to know when they're in pain necessarily unless they're in a lot of pain. With their paws, make sure you check their paws every day or every night. Make a plan for that. You might want to use some paw butter or Musher Secret. And if they are cracking, get them off trail, give them a 0 day, give them 2 0 days, they'll appreciate it. Clutter up their paws. You can always put it in a bounce box and bounce it ahead so you don't have to worry about carrying it, but definitely something to think about. Also, some dogs, their paws are a little bit more sensitive. I've met hikers that their dog's paws are very sensitive, they have to wear boots. So if you're gonna put your dog in boots, do some practice with that ahead of time before you get out on the trail, because they walk like this. They don't really know like what to do with these boots on. We live in Pennsylvania, we live in Duncannon, so we're kind of used to the rocks. She grew up on the rocks, so she's okay. I butter up her paws every couple days. Make sure you have a plan to get off trail if your dog is injured. Look ahead into the next towns that you're going to be in and see where their vet hospitals are. And definitely consider pet insurance. I personally use Trupanion. Trupanion is the only insurance that direct pays, which can be very helpful when you're on trail and on a budget. If you sign up with them, you can call them and they'll let you know where you are, where there's a vet that will direct pay, and you pay your copay and your deductible. So it's definitely worth the money every month, because you don't want to have a dog with a broken leg and $5,000, $8,000 for a surgery. One of the other things is a carrying harness. Pack a Paw and Fido Pro both make carrying harnesses for your dog that should be trained in advance as well. These can be really useful in, it's okay. Okay, come. In 1 second. Here. So carrying harnesses can be really good in places like New Hampshire or Dragon's Tooth. That's a pretty tricky rock scramble. If you train them, you can go ahead and put maybe your pack in the front and put your dog on the back, or vice versa. Next thing I'm going to talk about is nutrition. Definitely try whatever foods you're going to try and bring with you. Make sure they try them out at home. Some dogs, this one over here, has a very sensitive stomach. If I switch her food on her, she will get sick. So try them out at home. If your dog is like her and has very picky tastes, look into like a Chewy box that you can have dropped to mail drops, or have somebody shipping it to you. She is extremely picky about the food she eats, and she likes organic and limited ingredient. So if I try to give her other stuff, she turns her nose up and goes and lays down. Try to stick with like higher protein foods, because they are, what you're doing with your dog is a very athletic venture for them. So they need to be being fed well and healthy foods, calorie dense. If you stop for a snack, your dog should be snacking too. Whenever we stop for a snack, she gets some jerky, or she might get some bites. Another thing, I brought these with me, they're freeze-dried, because they're light, freeze-dried topper treats. They're a little bit higher in calories, and there's like, this one has like one ingredient, chicken. And they're so light, it's awesome. When you fix them lunch and dinner, consider something like dehydrated blueberries to add in with the meat. This one over here likes straight up meat and blueberries for lunch and dinner. Your dog is going to know what is going to work for their body. It's kind of trial and error a little bit in the beginning. It takes a little time to figure it out, but they are going to most likely turn their nose up at something if it's not what their body needs. They're not going to eat it. Now, I will say that while she's really picky, she does like white cheddar Cheetos. That is her junk food. And she will eat my entire bag if I let her. You can consider also bringing supplements with you for your dog that are joint supplements with, I can't think of the name now. Glucosamine and glutamine. Yes. That will really help, because it's going to be a strain on your dog's joints as well as you. So keep in mind that whatever you're feeling, your dog is also going to be feeling too. And whatever steps you're taking, your dog is taking. Your dog is having to climb a little bit more. They might have to, like, she's a smaller dog. So when we do rock steps, I mean, they're pretty up there for a short person, but for her, she's jumping up the rock steps. She's jumping down those rock steps. So keep in mind, it's going to be really hard on their joints. Training. Try to train your dog in some trail etiquette. So I taught her that the etiquette is to yield to uphill hikers. So we always step to the side of the trail, and the way I taught her this was by just pointing at the person and going, what do we do when we see an uphiller? And then I would pull her to the side of the trail. I put my leg in front of her like that, put her head against my leg, and I rub her ear so she feels comfortable. And also there's a lot of people out there that are afraid of dogs. They've had negative experiences. You're gonna make them feel more comfortable too if you have control over your dog. Directional cues. These are really, really good. So front, behind, left, right, and I did that backwards. But getting them in front for certain things. Keep in mind when you hike and you're behind someone who's taller than you, you experience the trail differently. So you want to give them an opportunity to experience the trail as well. Some people think that dogs don't like views or they're not going to enjoy things. They actually do. They will. I point out the mountain star and go, look at those mountains. And she'll just like kind of stare out at the mountains. So they want to see everything too, and they're very interested in watching the birds fly and what's coming on ahead of them. So walking in front's really great, but there's going to be other times that you want your dog behind you on icy terrain or on rock steps, on downhills, because a dog is naturally going to want to walk faster than you. And I will say it 1,000 times, I'm a very strong advocate for having your dog on leash throughout your hike. It's safer for everyone, and I'll get more into that a little bit later, but so behind is really important. Snake prone areas too. When we hiked in Georgia last year, it was very hot. Someone had just gotten bit by a rattlesnake in the area that we were hiking in. So she stayed behind me the whole time, and I was able to scan the ground for snakes. Make sure you teach them shelter etiquette. If you have an opportunity before you start your hike to go to a shelter, spend the night, or just spend an hour at a shelter, that teaches them you're not going to approach other people for food. You're not going to walk all over the shelter where people's stuff is. And keep them on leash even when you're at the shelter. A lot of people will get to the shelter, they unleash their dogs run around, they start jumping all over everybody's stuff. That's a really good way to not make friends on trail. Make sure that you teach your dog the proper way to act in a shelter or campsite environment. On the leash thing, really work hard with your dog on loose leash walking. Because dogs naturally do want to pull. So work really hard at getting that loose leash. Now I can say that sometimes she's like right at the end of the leash and she wants to like smell everything, or she might have just smelled the deer, so she's right at the end. Other times she's way back here, and I have actually tripped and fallen and banged my head on a puncheon from her being so loose leash walking. So some of the benefits of keeping your dogs on leash are obviously you're going to make friends easier if your dog is on leash and under control at all times on the trail. Because there's a lot of everybody's on the Facebook pages, everybody knows what gets said out there about dogs being on trail. A lot of people are against it because there are a lot of ill-behaved, poorly trained dogs on trail. So you're going to make friends easier, you're going to make other people feel more comfortable. And it's going to keep see, when I forgot my first dog, I didn't think about this, and I saw other people with their dogs off leash, and I thought it was okay for him to be off leash, and that was a big mistake. You will keep your dog safe from things like snakes, porcupines. You don't want a vet visit because they got to pull quills out of your dog, and running off. Dogs naturally want to chase things. So if they see a deer, they're going to want to chase it. I'm sure if I let her off leash and she saw a squirrel, she'd take off after it. I mean, I've trained her not to, but she would, because she's a dog. So, also, when you have your dog on leash, it's going to keep the wildlife safe. You can let them live in their own environment. One of the things that she's been taught is when you see a deer, you want to stay still, you want to stay quiet, and you want to watch. And that's perfectly acceptable. What's not acceptable is yelling at the deer, pulling to try to get to the deer, or disrupting wildlife. And that falls under leave wildlife alone. And it also is safer for your dog because there have been many instances where off-leash dogs have chased after bears and they don't make it out alive. And that's not a good thing. And then you're going to end up getting hurt because I know all of us will go to the death to defend our dogs. So you don't want to get hurt, you don't want your dog to get hurt. So back into a pack, she's got an alpha pack. It's one of the cottage industries. It's much lighter, it's got a breathable back to it. When you're starting to gear up your dog for hikes, get your dog ready by having them carry an empty pack. It's pretty equivalent to them wearing a harness. So just put it on them. Put it on them when you start walking with them. get them used to the empty, and then build up the weight. Just like we all have to build up our weight, they have to build up their weight as well. Don't just sock them down with weight. It's not going to be comfortable for them. You want to do exposure training as well. When I started going with her, I did exposure training, and you might not think about this, but shuttles. How's your dog going to feel when some stranger pulls up in a vehicle and says, "Come on in"? So you have to expose them to that, getting into a stranger's vehicle. Staying at a hostel, that's going to be a different experience for them. When you stay at a hostel, make sure you call ahead to make sure they take dogs, and you might want to consider a private room if they have one. A lot of dogs will be protective of you while you're sleeping because you're in a vulnerable position. So you might want to skip the bunk room, stay in a tent, or stay in a private room if they have one. If you're going to be going to a hotel, get them exposed. Take them in your local area, stay the night in a hotel. Get them exposed to the tent. With her, I set up the tent in the living room. It was set up for 3 months. I started with it empty, and then I slowly added a pad, a quilt, and then I added other things like a backpack that would be in there. I let her sleep in it so much that she didn't want me to take it down, and now she has a tent in my room permanently that she sleeps in every night. You have to remember, and I'll repeat this over and over, it's when you're hiking with your dog, it's not your hike anymore. It's your dog's hike. And that's really important to remember. If you don't want to make it your dog's hike, then you shouldn't take your dog. I wouldn't take as many breaks. Not that I'm fast or anything like that, but I wouldn't take as many breaks if it wasn't for her. The other day, it was really hot. She was getting used to, she was wearing a different pack. She was getting used to the heat. I'm getting used to the heat. No leaves on the trees. She overheated. We had to keep stopping. If it was just you, you're going to push through that heat and you're going to go straight to the shelter and you're going to say, "I'll just get there and I'll rest and I'll cool down." They can't do that. And so you're going to have to remember that. You might have to take more breaks and give them naps during the day. It's important to know, so that gets me into knowing your dog. You really have to know your dog very, very well. Is your dog reactive? So there's a lot of reactive dogs. My other dog is reactive. She is slightly reactive right now because she was attacked a few weeks ago. So you have to know what their triggers are, and you have to have a plan. I mean, you can pretty much, just a little tip for anybody who doesn't have a reactive dog. If you see someone take their dog and start climbing up the mountain on the side of the trail and hide behind a tree and squat down, their dog's reactive. So what you want to teach your dog to do is you want to teach them the give space command. This is an extremely important command. When you give them that give space command, that's going to teach them that dog we're going to pass. You don't want to scare them. We're going to give space to that dog, we're going to give space, and we're going to keep walking. Or you can communicate with that other person and say, what would you like me to do? People with reactive dogs, like I said, I have one, really appreciate that. So also, if your dog is reactive, really think about whether or not hiking with them is the right thing for them, because they can end up getting so stressed out that the hike becomes way too stressful for them to handle. You may enjoy having them there, they may love being with you, but they might get too stressed and then it becomes not enjoyable. And my other dog will shake if he sees another dog. He was attacked when he was 10 months old on trail. He can't be on trail anymore. He gets too scared, he shakes. I tried training, talked to trainers. He couldn't move past it. So he doesn't hike anymore because he would sit there and shake and just be grouchy the rest of the hike. How is your dog when your dog's tired? This one tends to get a little sassy and cranky. She's got cattle dog in her. They get a little sassy. So I know that when she's tired and cranky, I need to stop. I need to move myself into an area that's off the trail so she doesn't bark at anybody, and I need to give her that rest. And if that means that I'm getting to camp at 7 o'clock at night because she needs a nap at 5, that's what I gotta do. You just gotta do it. So have a plan for naps and breaks, isolating them from other dogs and other people when they're tired. Also think about how is your dog with other dogs. Dogs do tend to be a little territorial, so keep that in mind when you're setting up your tent at a campsite. I always set up my tent in the furthest area away from the shelter. And as much of an isolated, I should keep saying this out loud, but I'm in an isolated area, and and I keep her back there with me because she's cranky when she's tired. And I don't want her bothering anyone or feeling uncomfortable if someone's coming too close to our tent. Now that's not always possible because I stayed at campsites, at shelters where it's very busy, and just have plans. Really like watch your dog's body language. There's a lot of really good sources online where you can find out how to judge if your dog is feeling uncomfortable or scared, and then they can give you some good tips. Also think about how is your dog with other people and how is your dog with kids. Kids can be a real source of issue for dogs, and there are, especially in the summer, you'll come across big groups of kids, little kids hiking on the trail, Boy Scouts, who tend to be loud. How is your dog with that? Again, she doesn't like chaos, so we know when there's kids coming, it's the block, and you create your own space for your dog. So you just block your dog, you rub their head, get them comfortable. Consider carrying treats in your pocket to just kind of give them to them. Even if your dogs are already fully trained, having those treats with you is a really good idea to keep them kind of distracted from what's going on. So logistically, where are you going to get your dog's food for resupplies? Is your food that you use for your dog widely available, or do you need to have it shipped? Think about that before you leave. I was staying at a shelter one night. The woman decided to treat her dog with a can of Alpo from the Dollar General. The dog reacted very poorly to it. The dog was up all night crying and getting sick. So she got no sleep. No one else in that campsite got much sleep either. So keep that in mind. Like, make sure you're staying on top of the dog's food. And I brought these. These are, now we all gotta brush our teeth somehow on trails. So do dogs. So these are great. These are Whimsies. They brush their teeth. They'll get the plaque buildup. Especially if you're on a through. That's 6 months of them being out there without a toothbrush. So these are great, and they also are a nice little treat at the end of the day. Have them chew it while you're sitting around chatting, and it will brush your teeth for them. Like I said, with hotels or hostels, always call ahead. Some hotels do have fees, pet fees, and some won't let you come in if your dog's over a certain weight. Also, most shuttles I've run into hiking with her are dog friendly. I've never had anyone turn me down because they're not dog friendly, but it's good to just call ahead and be like, hey, by the way, I have a dog, are you okay with that? Some people are not okay with certain dogs, so just call ahead. When you get to Baxter State Park, dogs are not allowed. When you get to the Smokies, dogs are not allowed. There are boarding options. If you're not gonna board your dog for the Smokies, you gotta figure out how to get around it. And there's shuttle drivers that will move you around. Now, I'm gonna tell you a little sad story. So, I am holding off on Katahdin because she is service staff trained. I could bring her with me, but I'm not going to because it's a very difficult climb and it's a lot on a dog. So I will be holding off on Katahdin and finishing the trail until she's gone. And once she's gone, I'll hike with her ashes on Katahdin. So that just, I mean, she's healthy. She's not even 2 years old yet, but still. Make sure your dog is comfortable with gear. This is a Nemo Tensor torso pad. Yeah, she is a little spoiled. If you're going to use an inflatable pad with your dog, make sure you have a method of clipping their nails. That's another thing to bounce box is a nail clipper. There's also down dog bags. Makes ultra light quilts for dogs, and they're reasonably priced. You give them their measurements of your dog, and they make the quilt. I think this was like $180, and which is reasonable for an ultralight quilt. And they have 900 fill proof and like 7 denier fabric. I mean, this is a lighter quilt than what I use. So, you might not think about it, but when the ground's cold, your dog's gonna get cold too. So make sure that their pad that they're sleeping on has a proper R value. There are also ultralight options for dog bowls. Hightail Designs makes one. Theirs is very well designed. I use that one. Ben Campen also uses it. It's lighter, but it doesn't have the clips and stuff on it, so you can use that. Because, I mean, we all want to be a little ultralight, right? So, if your dog's going to be carrying a pack, which she does, she only weighs about 48 pounds. You have to be careful as to what your dog is carrying. You can get calculators online that will calculate it, but there's anywhere from 10 to 25% that they say your dog can carry. Your best bet is to talk to your vet at what percent you should be at. Now she can carry about 5.5%. or 5.5 pounds, but she carries about anywhere from 2 to 4. And that's what, because none of us want to be maxed out on our weight, and neither does the dog. This may sound silly, but think about a rain poncho for your dog. You have to put your dog in your tent at the end of the night. If it's been pouring all day, believe me, I did this last year in Massachusetts. It poured for 3 days and the trail was a stream. Your dog's gonna get in your tent all wet, and then they're gonna get your gear wet, then they're gonna get your sleeping bag liner wet, and then you're gonna freeze all night. So you can consider getting a poncho. That's what she's got this year. You can put that, size it up one size, and then it's a pack cover too. So you can go over your dog's pack, over them. Nice little, kind of ultralight little trick. And dogs, this is something I think a lot of people don't know, but dogs can get hypothermia. So if your dog, if you're gonna be out in the very cold, in the winter, you're gonna be hiking through the snow, it's extra weight, but carry a jacket, carry a puffy, carry a fleece for your dog. Make sure your dog is dry at the end of the day, because they can get hypothermia. It's not something a lot of people think of. I didn't even know this until the last year. So now traveling and camping on durable surfaces, this is where I go back to the leash. If you keep your dog on leash, it's gonna avoid them trampling the vegetation, and we all know we're not supposed to go trample vegetation. So keeping them on leash, teach them to stay on focus. That's what I give her. And you know, it's fine if they smell everything along the way. I mean, and keep that in mind too. I mean, you're not stopping on the ground and like smelling the vegetation as you go along on your hike, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to want to smell. Make sure you give them an opportunity to do that. Keep them on focus, keep them on the trail. When you're at camp, I talked about where you set up your tent. One of the tricks that I use is I try to find an area that's big enough for our tent. We have a 2-person Big Agnes Fly Creek. So I make sure it's got that, and then I make sure there's a little tree nearby to wrap her leash to, and a durable surface there so that she can lay down there while I get everything set up. Because it is really hard to set up your gear in your tent with a dog. It makes it a little complicated, because as soon as I get the tent set up, she wants to go in. So I hook her to a tree, and then also in the morning I pack up everything on the inside, get her to the tree on the outside, give her breakfast, and then break down the tent itself. So if you have a good area to to set up your tent, then you get to keep your dog leashed. One of the pet peeves for a lot of people is not disposing of dog waste properly. So you talked about the human waste, so you got to think about that for your dog too. It is possible to teach your dog not to pee or poop in a water source. That is possible. They might want to, it's running water, but you can teach them not to go there. And you can get them to step off trail to pee, or poop. But when you're on a long hike, a lash or a through, probably packing out your dog poop is going to not be feasible. So what I recommend for that is get it off trail. You can use a dog bag that you can reuse. Move it off trail, bury it just like you would bury your own. Do what you gotta do, and then you can put the poop bag in like an odor-proof little Ziploc bag and keep it for the next time. Don't let your dog poop on the trail, because we all with dogs know it gets a little sticky sometimes, and then other people are going to end up stepping in it. One of the things you can't teach your dog to do is pee on cue. So you can tell them, she knows to do this. It takes her a minute or two, but through all her travels and all her training, she has learned to pee on cue. That's very helpful, because you don't want them really waking you up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, even if you're waking up to go to the bathroom. You kind of want to sleep all night. So you can get them to go before you get in your tent at night, and you can also get them to go before you get on trail, so that in the morning, so that when you get out on trail, you can just go and it's not stopping to go to the bathroom. If you do use poop bags, do not leave them on the trail. They're not biodegradable, and just please don't. It's a pet peeve. I'm trying to make this so that, there are a lot of people out there who are like, keep dogs off the trail, they shouldn't be on trail. But if we can be responsible dog parents, pup parents, and we can make our dogs behave and be responsible for them, then people might change their minds as to how, you know, they feel about dogs being on trail with them. So on Respect Wildlife, I already touched on that. Just lots of training, exposure training. Exposure training is huge with dogs. The more they see something, the less sensitive they are to it. Some dogs do have particular animals they really, really love, like her and her squirrels. But you teach leave it. Leave it is an extremely important thing no matter where you go, if you're in a store, if you're on the trail. You do not want them picking up and eating something that's going to make them sick. So you don't want them eating deer poop or, you know, any other poop out there. So leave it is extremely important. And teach them that we watch animals, we don't chase them. So even if your dog is leashed, you can teach them to just be chill. We're going to watch that deer over there, and we're going to let that deer do its thing. And then when it's done doing its thing, it's eating its breakfast, then we can proceed. And I'm sure the deer appreciate it. So leashing your dog facilitates that leaving wildlife alone, because yes, your dog wants to explore. It can explore while it's on leash. It can still smell things. But leashing your dog is going to keep them from engaging that inner primal instinct that says, I must chase that because it's really fun and interesting, or that squirrel has a really cool bushy tail and it kind of looks like a cat and I want to go play with it. So that's even for the best well-trained dog. She has had an immense amount of training, and she still has that inner, like every once in a while, walking through the park, we'll see a squirrel and she's like, you know, but so even the best trained, because a lot of people say, well, my dog's really well trained. Well, my dog's really well trained, and she still sometimes wants to go after squirrels. So teaching them to leave wildlife alone will allow you to have the same wildlife experiences that other hikers are having on trail, which is something I hear a lot is, well, if you're hiking with your dog, you must not see a lot of wildlife. You must never see bears because they'll take off. You must never see deer. No, we see deer and bears because she's leashed. And I'm glad everybody's got their dogs on leash, thumbs up. But so what if you say, I'm not going to train my dog. It's fine. I did that. I'm guilty with my first dog. Or you don't leash your dog. The dog can run off to chase something, and it can get lost. It can get injured. It can be bitten by a rattlesnake and be lying dying in the woods somewhere. And that's horrible to think, but that can happen. I met a hiker who left her dog off leash all the time. The dog had been bitten by multiple snakes, had been swiped by a bear. She would lose the dog for a day at a time, and no one knew where the dog was. It was territorial at shelters and would bark at hikers. So you don't want your dog to run off, and think that in your head, like you don't want your dog to run off, get injured, off trail somewhere you don't know where they are, and they're dying and they don't have you with them. So if you're not going to leash your dog for any other reason, if you think, well, you know, forget everybody else, my dog likes being off leash, think about how you would feel if you never saw your dog again. Shenandoah dogs have chased after bears and gotten killed. And like I said before, if you're with them, you might run after them, you might get killed too. You know, because now you're seen as a threat by that bear. So leashing is also falls under being respectful of other visitors. So I hear this from a lot of people when I'm hiking with her on leash. Oh, your dog hikes on leash? I could never do that. My dog would drag me off the mountain. Well, having made the mistake the first time of not leash training my dog, and I can't hike with him because he would pull me off the mountain, it requires a lot of training, a lot of patience, a lot of treats. These little savory bites are great because you can put them in a little odor-proof Ziploc, stick them in your head belt pocket, and teach them. Teach them to get in front, get behind, get on the side. Slow down. That's a big one. I know when her ears go back, she means business because I have taught her to be really focused on the trail. So her ears will actually like go back and get more aerodynamic when she wants to like really move, which sometimes is great because I'm like, all right, I want to be off trail by 7 and we're doing this long hike and we're going downhill and I want to move. So let's let that aerodynamicness kick in. But you can teach your dog to walk nicely on leash. It takes time, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes patience. But it's what's best for you, it's what's best for your dog, it's what's best for everybody. It's best for other dogs. You will want to practice with a leash, which is a little tricky. is when you're gonna navigate rocky terrain or you're gonna navigate a rock scramble. Now, I heard this too, rock scrambles, you can't do it with your dog on leash. You can if you teach your dog to be patient and slow. We did the north side of Bear Mountain in Connecticut, and it was tricky, but the only thing I would change is I would have brought and packed a maybe 10-foot leash so that it gave her more space to climb ahead of me instead of her like kind of scrambling up and then I've got to catch up. Navigating blowdowns, that's pretty easy with your dog. You can teach your dog to do it. I unclip her. If it's a tricky blowdown, I'll unclip her from my hip belt, and then I'll hold the leash out and let her go under or over. In the beginning, she would go under, or she would choose whichever way is better. Now she just goes whichever way I do, and we were in Virginia a couple weeks ago, and it was like up to here, and she decided she wanted to jump it because I was going over it. So remember when you're talking about other visitors, some people are scared of dogs. Your dog can be the sweetest, most wonderful dog in the world. They're still scared. They might have been attacked by another dog. They might have, like, I was chased and attacked by a dog when I was little. I was terrified of dogs until I started hiking. So just try to keep that in mind. And if your dog's off leash and it runs up to someone, no, absolutely no one wants to hear the phrase, "Don't worry, he's friendly." No one wants to hear that because in that moment, they don't feel your dog is friendly. I mean, I had that happen to me a few weeks ago. The guy yelled out, "Oh, don't worry, they're friendly." And the big dog grabbed her by the scruff and started shaking her, and I had to fight off the dogs. 2 German Shepherds. So, since she's sleeping, I'm not going to demonstrate this. She loves to just like chill, as you can see. But when I see people, I step to, in order to be considerate of other visitors, I step to the side. I'll even do it on uphills. I'm a severe asthmatic, so it doesn't bother me that much because it gives me a chance to catch my breath. But I will step to the side, put the leg in front, like I said, put your dog's head right up against your leg, rub the ears, get them all nice and relaxed, feed them treats if you want. It's not that your dog is misbehaved or doesn't know how to act around other people. It's just you're comforting them in case they get a bad feeling from someone. Now, she's very people-friendly. She has gotten bad feelings from people, and I'm going to say that too. Trust your dog. If your dog is not reactive, trust your dog. If your dog is reacting to someone and is usually very calm and friendly, get out of there. Because we've had that happen twice, and I trusted her. Normally, like I said, she's in hiker trash mode when she's out there. She wants to be friends with everybody. With permission, that's another thing. Make sure when you're on the trail, if someone, try to watch the other person's body language. If that person seems interested in meeting your dog, you can go ahead and say, if it's okay with you, I'm not saying you have to, but, oh, you can pet him if you want. That's how I handle it with her. Do not allow your dog to approach everyone without permission. I repeat it to her on the trail. I'll say, not without permission, not without permission. I know you're only supposed to say a cue once. I say it multiple times because I want to be emphasizing it. So, like I said online, there's a lot of comments. I've seen people post that they will kick a dog in the face, that they will hit them with their trekking poles, that they will bear spray a dog. There have been people online who have threatened to stab and shoot dogs. So that's another reason to keep your dog on leash. You don't want to run into someone like that because your dog might be friendly and just run up to somebody because they want to say hi, and somebody might boot kick your dog. So just keep in mind that people like that are out there. And also, if your dog runs up to another dog and it's not off leash, could end up with a problem. I mean, different breeds of dogs play in different manners. So she plays with her brother very rough. They wrestle around, they gnash their teeth, they nip at each other. They're herding dogs, that's how they play. But if she were to run up to another dog to play like that and do that, that other dog might take that as an attack. And that might end up with that dog attacking your dog. Or you don't know if another dog is in the middle of training for something. Not all the service dogs wear vests. She never wears a vest unless we're doing public access. So she never wears a vest. So when we got attacked, I'm like, you attacked a service dog. So you might end up setting that dog's behavior. Your dog, the sweetest dog in the world, might have just wanted to play, and you might have just set that dog's training back a year or 2 years and have to start from scratch, which is what I have to do with her with dogs. She's being very good with all these dogs around. I'm very proud of her today. She's been really nervous. But while you're hiking, like I said, consider stepping off trail to let people pass, even if you're going uphill. Train your dog on how to handle passing others. You know, try to put them in a heel, or I like to get her real close to me because I don't know the other person. So I like to get her real close to me and heel her, or most of the time just let the other person pass. It's not a big deal to just stop for a second. She knows, you know, I put that leg out, head against my leg, she knows we're gonna let somebody else pass. How to handle narrow trail. There are a lot of sections of the trail that are very, very narrow, and you're not necessarily going to be able to give people the space to pass. So make sure you have a plan with your dog to handle that. A lot of times in those situations, I've had people say, just go ahead and go. Also, one thing that pretty much people probably don't think of, but there's a lot of sections of the trail that are very popular with trail runners. So you're gonna, especially with her, I don't know if there's any other herding breeds here. Is she herding? I think yours, I thought, maybe. But herding breeds want to herd. So when they see a trail runner, they want to herd. So you got to teach them how to handle trail runners, step to the side. Our very first time leaving Pennsylvania to hike somewhere was right up here, and there was a marathon going on. And she was about 4.5 months old, and we hiked from Gatlin to Weaverton, and there was a marathon, and there were probably like hundreds of runners out there. And it was like, well, baptism by fire. You got to learn how to handle trail runners. And they also might want to like take off faster after they see a trail runner. Not after that runner, but they might want to go like, they're doing the right thing. That sounds like fun. Let me go. You are walking way too slow. So again, at camp, just train your dog on the tent exposure. If you haven't already and you're going out and you're heading out this weekend, don't worry about it. You can walk your dog through it, set your tent up a little bit further. We all react to things in the middle of the night. We might lie awake our first couple nights on trail, just kind of listening to the different noises. Your dog might do the same thing. So, little tip that I found that works really, really well is calming chews. Calming chews are a beautiful, beautiful thing for your dog, especially in the beginning of getting them out in the tent, because their hearing is so much better than ours. So you might not hear the animal, but they might hear an animal way far away. I did not use them with my first dog, and he was howling at coyotes all night long. So I'm like, stop calling the coyotes, they're not our friends. So calming chews are great. I used them with her last year while she was getting into backpacking. It gives them an opportunity to have a really good night's rest, and just like we all need to recoup our muscles, they need to recoup their muscles too, because they're going to be doing the same miles as you. The way I kind of eased into it, and if you didn't do this yet and you're heading out now, don't worry about it. Start car camping. Go ahead.
So was that you said you used for the howling?
I used hemp calming chews. You can get them on Amazon. They're like all natural. They work really. The hemp ones work really well. With my reactive dog, he gets them every night so that he doesn't. We live in an apartment complex, so that he doesn't like howl at every single car that drives by in the middle of the night too. And it really helped her get that rest that they need, because sometimes they're just a little restless at the end of the day. They take a little while maybe to settle down. Those calming chews, like, you can give them half a dose, you give them the full dose, they'll be out all night. It will be out all night. We started at Bear's Den, our first night out. We stayed at Bear's Den, the car was right there, so we could leave if need be. We did a hike during the day and then did that, so she would be tired. Then we moved to staying at Dahlgren, because it was an easy out. And then we went on our first backcountry camping trip, which was down by the James River footbridge. And that was fun. She made best friends with a hiker. So if your dog is very reactive to noise, like I said, consider calming chews, making sure you're away from other campers, just to keep them happy and keep other people happy too, you know, because I love dogs. I absolutely love dogs, but it is very frustrating if you're at a campsite. You just hiked a 15-mile day, you're exhausted. When your dog's exhausted, you just want to sleep, and there's a dog barking like 2 tents over from you. So, shelter etiquette, I'll go back to that real briefly. If your dog is wet, do not let it in the shelter, especially if other people's gear is set up. Keep your dog out of the shelter. Because they're going to walk all over other people's gear, because they just hiked and all those sleep pads and quilts look really comfortable. Teach your dog, don't beg other hikers for food. That's one of the ways with this is to just keep them fed during the day. If you're giving them all the snacks and they know that when they get to camp they're going to eat, and you get them in a really good routine, that's a really good way of keeping them from begging, because they know what's coming. Personally, I think it's best to tent with your dog. I would never stay in a shelter with her. getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, or shifting around on their pads, making noise, and that might irritate your dog. If your dog's tired and cranky, they might bark, wake other people up. And I think it's safest for the dog to be inside the tent with you. Some people have their dog outside the tent. You can't control their environment when they're outside the tent. You don't know what little creepy crawlies are going to be creepy crawling around in the middle of the night. You also don't know who's going to come up. Unfortunately, we have to think about the negative, and there are people out there that will steal your dog. You definitely don't want to keep your dog out. I know I gave you a lot of negatives, but I just want you guys to be prepared. So that's it, and this is Sleepy Boots. Does anyone have any questions?
Is that the leash you like with?
No, I typically use this leash. I got actually this one for today because I figured there would be dogs here, and she's having some adjusting to having been attacked. I usually use a Wilder dog leash. It's, of course, tie-dye, but it's waterproof. It's really durable. This leash is a year old, and it's got no pulling at the seams or anything. I highly recommend Wilder dog. Sometimes I've forgotten her leash, and she's hiked with her public access leash, but it's usually the waterproof one. And it's about 6 feet. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
So I wondered, I haven't been here for the whole time, but could we meet the other dogs, or just
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and, like, if you brought your dog with you, stand up and, like, give your name and your dog's name, and if you're section or day hiking or just, trying to get some info or through hiking. Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name is Buck. This is Raisin.
Raisin.
I guess it's mine. I'm Amber, this is Belle. We're planning to go through hike for hopefully next year.
Hi, Belle.
I'm Bush, this is Boyd. We're about 237 miles into a 4 months.
Nice. Very, very well behaved dogs here. Very good. I think there was another dog in the back too, right? Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I just want to make sure everybody's prepared with their dogs. Think about all the positives and the negatives. Make sure you're prepared. And also, just add one thing. Just understand that, I don't know if you've experienced this, sometimes you might have a little bit more solitary of an experience out there with your dog than you would if you didn't hike with your dog, because people might not necessarily want to be around dogs. But we're going to change that. We're going to absolutely change that. We're going to be responsible dog owners and pet parents, and we're going to be good stewards so that people change their mind about dogs on trail, right? Right.
Thank you so much, VCP. I've learned so much, even though I'm not a dog owner. I hope you'll learn some new things too. All right, well, it's raffle time. And I'm looking for someone who's going to